Hi, I'm Jonas from the Graz University of Technology, and I will now tell you how we can even further improve computer security against Rowhammer. And because this question will probably be asked, yes, you can combine CSI Rowhammer with Rega for perfect security, I would say. Because you already heard a lot of the background of Rowhammer, I will jump right into it with the problem with Rowhammer countermeasures. Many previous Rowhammer countermeasures focus on characteristics of Rowhammer that later turn out to be incomplete. I have a few examples. For example, that Rowhammer isn't that bad and bit flips are infrequent. So we can just increase the refresh rate or use ECC RAM and then it's fine. That's sadly not true. Or that we can detect Rowhammer with performance counters. There were mitigations built with that characteristic, but that's sadly not true as well. Another one, we already talked about the blast diameter. It was long thought that the blast diameter is 1, and a lot of mitigations are based on that. But last year, Kogel et al. Showed that this is not true as well. So what do we actually need? CSI Rowhammer. A generic approach to data integrity protection. What do we mean by that? We mean that with CSI Rowhammer, we are able to detect all data integrity failures with a cryptographic MAC. So we don't care where bit flips come from. It could be Rowhammer, it can also be cosmic rays, or something entirely new we don't even know yet that it exists, but will be there in a few years, who knows. Together with this detection of all bit flips, we have a best effort correction, and with this we can mitigate all Rowhammer attacks in the worst case to a denial of service. So in almost all cases, Rowhammer is completely fixed. In the worst case, it's denial of service. No privilege escalation or stuff like that. How do we do that? Here we have the DRAM. This is where Rowhammer happens. And here we have the CPU with the memory controller. And on every read and write to the DRAM, the memory controller computes a cryptographic MAC of the data and then stores it on an additional chip of ECC DRAM. So we use ECC DRAM for that, like in every server at the moment. On this additional chip of the ECC DRAM, we store the integrity information. And then on each read, we compute the MAC of the data again, compare it with the stored MAC, and we know if the data changed or not. If the MAC is not equal, we can correct a single bit flip in hardware, and if there are more bit flips, we delegate the correction to the operating system through a new exception. The operating system has an exception handler, and in there it can do two things. First, it can do a correction as a search, which is a simple brute force search, which sounds bad now, but is actually quite performant. Or another big advantage of a software correction is, the correction as a search uses a new CPU instruction to compute the MAC of the data. So we do this completely in hardware with a key that's not known to the software. But another thing that the software can do, it can do advanced correction because it has knowledge about the data that is corrupted. For example, data that is disk-backed, we can just reload it from the disk. We don't have to do any correction. The last thing that's there is that the whole operating system is in the DRAM. So an attacker could hammer the exception handler and break the system. To prevent that, we add a secure memory into the CPU. It's only 4 pages large, so tiny compared to the caches of modern CPUs, so area overhead is not a problem. And we put the exception handler in the secure memory in the CPU. This is the whole design. Let's look at it in a bit more detail. On every read and every write, we compute the MAC. So this has to be as quickly as possible. For this, we use a PMAC construction using the Karma block cipher. That's also used by ARM for pointer authentication. And we use the physical address as a tag to have different MACs for the same data at different locations. And with this design, we can compute the MAC of 556-bit data in only 5.13 nanoseconds, and for 512-bit data in 6.6 nanoseconds, which is small compared to the 100 nanoseconds it approximately takes to access the DRAM. Let's look at the data correction. MACs cannot correct bit flips. That's part of the design. So what we have to do is we need a brute force search with approximate equality. The MAC is stored in a DRAM, which means that the MAC can also be hammered with Rowhammer, and single bits in the MAC could change. To prevent that, or not to prevent it, but to be able to handle that, on the MAC compare, we don't expect the MAC to be exactly equal. Approximately equal is fine. So here you can see the MAC is computed. We get also the MAC from the DRAM. One bit is different. That's fine for us. I will talk about this in the security evaluation. The clip, okay. And we have parity bits to shrink the search space. This is our correction time. We need to correct bit flips with our brute force search. We can see for a single bit flip, which we do in hardware, we're in the range of a few nanoseconds. You can also see how long it takes for ECC DRAM to correct bit flips. There's a huge range that we took from different papers that looked at ECC. And then for the software correction, we first have an overhead of the exception handler, and then the correction time increases exponentially. But we can still correct 5-bit flips in under a second, and 8-bit flips in an almost reasonable time of a few hours. If the data is really important, I could be fine. But we also have advanced error correction. In many cases, we don't have to do brute force search, because the operating system has knowledge about the corrupted data. So it could just reload disk-baked data, or recompute data. For example, if page tables are flipped, which is a really common exploit target for Rowhammer exploits. And then we don't need any brute force search, and the overhead is really small. OK, we also evaluated CSI Rowhammer, and for this we used GEM5 to implement the MAC computation, the comparison in hardware, and we modified the Linux kernel to have the exception handler and perform the advanced correction everything in software. We used this first to evaluate the correct functionality. So we induced bit flips in the DRAM of our GEM5 model, and the MAC was able to detect the failure and then correct everything. And we also used it to evaluate the performance overhead, because we have this MAC computation on every read and every write. This is the performance overhead we get for the parsec and splash2x benchmarks. And the geometric mean is less than 1%, and the highest overhead is a bit over 4% for DDR4 memory, where we have a 6.6 nanoseconds delay, and a bit over 3% for DDR5 memory, where we have a smaller delay because we have less data. And this is quite a nice result, because if we look at the approximately 100 nanoseconds it takes to access the DRAM, and around 5 nanoseconds it takes to compute the MAC, and we have this very memory-bound benchmark, OceanCP, we can see that the performance overhead is around 5% there. So that's the maximum we can get for a really memory-bound application. We also evaluated the security, and especially the approximate equality, because it sounds kind of fishy at first to not require all bits in the MAC to be the same, but we looked at that in detail. So we need this, again, because Rowhammer can also induce bit flips into the MAC, and the approximate equality decreases the MAC strength from the initial 56-bit we have. And we computed this table. For example, if we have 5 data bit flips, and we do the brute force correction as a search, we need 2 to the power of 26 attempts while brute forcing for the correct data. And if we ignore 3 bits in the MAC strength decreases from 56 bits to 41.2 bits. But this 41.2 bits is still a lot higher than 26, so we are still safe. And the same is true for higher number of bit flips in the data. If we just ignore less bit flips in the MAC, we are always safe. And for less data bit flips than 5, which is the most common, you have a single or 2 or 3 bit flips in the worst case, we don't allow more than 3 bit flips in the MAC. And in this very common case of a few bit flips in the data, we are really strong. We computed the strength and the silent data corruption rate, so of a system that's not under attack, is that we have 1 not detected bit flip in less than 10 to the power of 9 billion years, so that's not of any concern. And if you have a system that's really under attack by a really fortunate attacker that is able to flip multiple bits every 250 milliseconds for a full year straight, so that's not really realistic at the moment with DRAM, the chance that it finds a second pre-image is less than 10 to the power of minus 5%. That's it for now. If you want more details about, for example, the corruption exception nesting detection that we need, or how CSI Rowhammer can work with virtualization with or without guest support, we have many more interesting implementation details, for example, how to protect the stack of the corruption exception handler, and also a more detailed security evaluation that shows why this works really well. Read the paper. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Please go on to the mic.
Really nice work. Love the overhead being low and everything. I have one question regarding the action taken when the error is detected, right? You're trying to correct it. And coming from the hardware crypto community, I mean, these kinds of problems have been around for a long time. And embedded community, typically when you detect a fault, you attribute it to an adversary being present, and then you basically stop the computation, right? I mean, because that might also, the correction itself might give you a timing channel, potentially.
Yeah, we looked at the timing side channel in the paper. That's not of concern. But of course, the operating system knows about a potential attacker, so it can do different things. It could also kill processors that have many, yes, okay. That's also, everything is possible there.
Thank you.
There was also a paper just recently published that just moves the page that is attacked somewhere else. I think copy and flip. That's possible with this solution as well, yeah.
Great work. Is there any reason you didn't include encryption on the memory contents as well as the Mac?
Yes, performance, basically. We wanted to have a least performance overhead as possible, but if you combine this with encryption, of course, you get additional security.
More questions? So I have one. You showed that you are able to correct the bit flip faster, or at least with less variability than current ECC-based solutions. I'm wondering, how are you able to do it faster than simple ECC?
It's a bit misleading. I'll try again. You're talking about. Yeah, that's it, right? So we are correcting a single bit flip in 256 bits of data, and ECC is correcting a single bit flip in 64 bits of data. But if we look at Rowhammer attacks, that the chance that they're usually not really in a high locality, so this is comparable.
Thank you. Any more questions? Okay, so let's thank the speaker again.